Welcome to the SDG Learncast with me, Pauline Duman. In every episode, I bring insightful conversations around the subject of sustainable development and learning, helping us all to achieve a sustainable future. In this podcast episode, we welcome Yasmine Sherif, the Director of Education Cannot Wait, or ECW, which is the United Nations Global Fund for Education in Emergencies and Protracted Crisis. Yasmine will provide insights into the work of Education Cannot Wait to support quality education outcomes for refugees, internally displaced, and other crisis-affected girls and boys, ensuring that no one is left behind. Welcome to the SDG Learncast, Yasmine.
Thank you very much, Pauline. It's my pleasure to be with you.
Yasmine, please share with us your background and your work at the Education Cannot Wait.
Thank you so much. My name is Yasmine Sherif, and I'm a human rights lawyer by training. I joined the United Nations in 1988 as an intern, in 1989 as a professional, and I have worked in many crisis-affected areas around the globe. Lived and worked in Sudan, across the Middle East, the Balkans, Afghanistan, and also traveled to many of these places. And I worked both on the humanitarian side and the development side, which is very important for the work that we do at Education Cannot Wait, which requires us to work on the humanitarian development nexus in bringing education, or SDG 4, to children and adolescents who are affected by armed conflict, climate disasters, or forced displacement.
You have seen a lot of humanitarian crises in your professional life. What are the unique challenges faced by education in humanitarian contexts and protracted crisis?
Broadly, every humanitarian context does not provide a conducive environment for any development. But at the same time, humanitarian assistance alone does not empower or lay the groundwork for the future or for rising out of the crisis and bring peace. So it's important to bring a crisis-sensitive development into a humanitarian context, to begin that work and to also ensure that we truly and genuinely empower those we serve beyond humanitarian assistance, which is important in itself. Now, when it comes to education, SDG 4, in many ways, it's foundational development goal, because if we want to achieve gender equality, we want to end extreme poverty, the very basis for that is to ensure that the citizens of a country, especially the young generation, receive a quality education. Or else, none of the sustainable development goals can be achieved if you have an illiterate population. So that's why Education Cannot Wait was established by the World Humanitarian Summit, so that more funding would be invested towards education in emergencies and protracted crisis. And we have moved rapidly since our operationalization in 2017 to become a very big global fund with investments in over 44 crisis-affected countries.
You are bringing light on an important issue in this humanitarian context and protracted crisis. Education cannot take place in these contexts, and I would like to underline the consequences of neglecting education in humanitarian responses. What are the risks of not providing education to displaced children and youth?
First of all, let's just look at the sheer number of children and adolescents who today live in countries like Afghanistan, the Rohingyas in Bangladesh, across sub-Saharan Africa, in several countries in the Middle East, such as Yemen, Syria, Iraq, and in the West Bank and Gaza in occupied Palestine. We are speaking of 222 million children and youth who do not access a quality education today. And that's a figure that Education Cannot Wait produced through painstaking research, and which was endorsed by the civil society and United Nations review panels. And out of this 222 million, you have 78 million are completely out of school. They never put their foot in a classroom. And then you have 54% of them being girls. 54% being girls, speak about gender equality. And 17% have functional difficulties, and 16% are forcibly displaced. So we are speaking about very stark figures, and the remaining ones who are in school, they're not learning. They literally sit in a classroom that is probably bombed out or very rudimentary, but there is no teacher training, there is no facilities for learning, no school supplies. So 222 million children, you can just imagine what the overall consequences will be for us globally one day. However, in particular for the lives of these young children and adolescents, their lives are, of course, at stake and that of their societies. Girls tend to be subjected to sexual gender-based violence, trafficking, early marriages, unwanted pregnancies. So there's an enormous destruction of their potential and their future. And the boys are more prone to be tempted through monetary means or force against their will to be drawn into armed groups as child soldiers or terror groups. And this does not bode very well for any country if the young population ends up in that situation. And these are very real risks that are happening as we speak. The school provides safety, it provides protection, and it also provides an opportunity to have hope for your future. But it got to be a quality education where you learn to read and write, you receive mental health and psychosocial services, you receive a school meal, and you have a pathway for your learning, 12 years a minimum, and then hopefully also access to a tertiary education, so that we get the doctors, the teachers, the nurses, the engineers that every country needs to rebuild from a conflict.
It is crucial to address a major concern: the barriers to education. This problem affects all children, but it disproportionately affects those in certain circumstances, particularly marginalized children, based on their backgrounds and specific demographics, like girls and young people with disabilities, face even steeper hurdles when it comes to accessing education. So, the question we need to ask ourselves and explore in this discussion is, how can we make education more accessible for these marginalized groups? And how does education cannot wait help these children?
So, what education cannot wait, what we do is that we take education is a development service. It's a basic service from a development perspective. And that's why it is part of sustainable development goals. But you cannot take a development sector into a crisis country without being mindful of the crisis context and dynamics. This is critically important. What you do in, let's say, a country that is not at war but has development challenges like India, you can't just cut and paste that into Afghanistan or Mali. Because when you are working and operating in a crisis context, there is violence, armed groups, extreme poverty, of course, and huge protection needs. And so you have to tailor a development sector like education into the crisis so that it actually yields results and impact. We have two kind of responses. We have what we call a first emergency response, when there is an escalation of a crisis or a sudden influx of refugees, and where we can come in very fast for 1 year and provide the financial support and the crisis sensitized approach to a specific population that has been hit by a crisis. It could be climate-induced disaster as well, or as I said, refugees or an escalation of a conflict. But the most interesting aspect of our work is what we call the multi-year resilience programs. And they bring humanitarian actors and development actors together and create what we call a joint program, which is also part of the United Nations Secretary General's reform program. We got to work together in one program where you look at who has the added value for teacher training. the added value for school meals, the added value for infrastructure to build schools, the added value for protection, water and sanitation. And you bring all of that together alongside the curriculum and improved quality training and school material. And you bring that together in one program. And humanitarian development actors work side by side. Some focus on system building, other focus on the immediate needs, and then it's given according to their added value and contribution. And by doing that and having a very strong focus on protection, which is clearly a crisis-sensitive approach, with protection of girls, protection of boys, protection of schools. We see a growing number of attacks against educational facilities and students, as well as school administration and teachers. But we help to develop that program, which is always developed in country, but facilitated by Education Cannot Wait, against the existing plans in country. They may not be possible to implement because there's still a conflict or still forced displacement, and invest for 4 years. And then we turn to our strategic donor partners, private sector, and ask them to come in and also provide financial means to realize that program and implement it fully.
We are delving into the holistic approach required to address education crisis, which extends beyond simply providing educational resources. This approach necessitates considering factors like water, sanitation, and numerous interconnected elements that play into providing effective education. I'm genuinely intrigued by this holistic perspective that you apply at Education Cannot Wait. We would appreciate, of course, if you could give us a glimpse into how you navigate these intricacies, considering the numerous stakeholders, each with varying responsibilities and the necessity for collaboration, coordination, and understanding the unique community needs in each context. Could you share with us your experience of working in such a situation? Your work goes beyond just education. There are people who need medical attention, food, water, and access to basic necessities in these humanitarian contexts. We're eager to learn how you juggle these multitude of pressing needs.
I'll give you a wonderful example that really was very moving, and I've seen so many of them as I travel around. But I was recently in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and we went to Tanganyika, which is in eastern DRC, and visited a village I had never, ever seen a school before. And through this joint program, and there are many of those schools and efforts, but this particular one we visited, since everything we do is to scale. It's not a single individual school here and there, but it's actually a scaled up approach where we multiply it. But you come to this school and the infrastructure is impeccable. There's a school there. All the washing facilities, the toilets are top notch. You can just imagine in a country where you don't have access to that. It's very difficult for a child to go to school. It's difficult for girls to menstruate. It's difficult also in terms of feeling protected if you don't have bathrooms, girls and boys, and also in a good quality and safe environment. So we saw that as part of the school. The World Food Program and the Salvation Army and UNICEF, their role had done a big part of that work. But then you also had a World Food Program and the Salvation Army and local civil society that provided school feeding. There was a big mental health and psychosocial services investment. The teachers had undergone proper quality training, and the school was under protection. You could feel very safe there as a child. And so all that holistic, the elements making it holistic was there. And it was there thank you to the fact that everyone was working together. It wasn't like one organization comes in and provides school feeding in a school that doesn't have bathroom, doesn't have infrastructure, no teacher training. No, that's a very fragmented way of doing it. But here we could see a school that had all the facilities that you and I would have found when we went to school. And that's how we operate. And it's possible because we bring in so many different actors. It's the variety of so much expertise. And capacities. And yeah, it was fantastic to see that school. And this is how we operate everywhere. We work with Rohingyas in Cox's Bazar. We make sure that every piece of the puzzle is matching. For the Rohingyas, of course, that's non-formal training because it's a political issue. We need to bring them, of course, ideally into public school system, like the children I met in DRC or in Uganda. But there we also need political support. And of course, the government of Bangladesh will need financial support to absorb them into the public school system. But there we do what we can through the non-formal system until time has come and we finally can help them into the public system. Or conditions have been so conducive to the return according to the standards set by UNHCR to go back to Myanmar. But those conditions are not there yet.
Your experiences truly inspire us, and it's easy to picture your team traversing diverse locations, all the while grappling with potential personal safety risks. You're collaborating with various partners amidst vast community needs, even when things might not always run as smoothly as desired. It's truly heartening to realize that despite these challenges, success is achievable and there are dedicated individuals fervently working to ensure that children and young people caught in these situations aren't lost to this generation. A recurring topic of discussion lately has been the role of technology in education, particularly in the context of humanitarian crisis and protracted crisis. Would you be able to shed some light on this issue? How is technology utilized in delivering education in these challenging contexts? How accessible is it, and how does it genuinely aid those you're trying to help?
Thank you very much. I think it's a very important question because we do discuss more, and it's raised, how technology can, especially after COVID-19, where so many children and adolescents had to leave school and go home, how can we continuously use technology and scale it up to support the continued learning? I think it's important here to remember that the countries where we invest are usually, the majority of them are countries with very weak, if any, infrastructure. So while we can use technology in countries like Ukraine and neighboring countries where you have the infrastructure required, or in Lebanon, in most of these countries, you cannot. The majority of the 222 million children and adolescents cannot be reached with digital and broadcast distance learning. They have no access to Wi-Fi, they don't have access to equipment, but also the infrastructure in the country does not allow for it. We're speaking about children and adolescents who sit in IDP camps in the middle of the desert. I went to Mali some time ago, and there's just desert and a handful of trees around them. How do you bring technology in Afghanistan? When you go out in a mountainous terrain where 90% of the population lives, how will they be reached through technology? Because they don't even have that basic infrastructure. So it's good that we keep finding solutions, and solar systems might be one where we can connect technology to those children. We cannot rely on exclusively and assume that they have the infrastructure required. I remember even where you have the infrastructure, I was in Lebanon some time ago, and the refugee family from Syria, they had one smartphone. This was during COVID, actually. One smartphone, 4 children and 2 adults sharing a smartphone. Now, the Lebanese teachers were sending homework and tests to the children via the smartphone during COVID. But there are 4 children in different classes, and then there are 2 adults. So that's one thing. You don't have enough smartphones for the family to actually effectively learn. And two, then the refugee family needs to pay for the Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi and the cost could be up to $150 a month. No refugee family has that money available. Technology in itself needs to be put in the right context. And if we rely on technology only, we are really forgetting the 95% of the 222 million children and adolescents who simply have no access or the means. I want to say something, yes, to respond. because you said that in ECW and we travel and we are exposed and so forth. We travel with the support of our mother organization, the United Nations, and UNICEF plays an instrumental role in that. But I would really like to extend our appreciation and thanks to all the UN agencies and civil society organizations, international and local, who actually live there and do the work all week around. They are our greatest heroes. If it weren't for them, we couldn't make these investments. So I think the big thanks go to them. We invest in them and they do the actual work and they do it very well. And they've allowed us to reach over 7 million children and adolescents with quality education. And during COVID-19, over about 31 million children and adolescents were reached through our investments. Our uploads go to and thanks to our colleagues in country.
Yasmine, it would be fantastic if you could share some success stories with us. Have there been instances where children, despite being in humanitarian or protracted crisis, have benefited significantly from gaining access to education? And more importantly, what insights or lessons have you gleaned from these triumphs?
Thank you so much. And let me also allow me to just make a very important addition to my thanks on FSW. It's also, of course, the Ministries of Education, because they lead the process with us. And they're very supportive and appreciative of the work we do, and they also lead the work. But the implementers are, of course, in the crisis context, always the NGOs and the UN on behalf of the government. Success stories, well, I don't want to go into individuals because you're speaking about millions and millions, but I can say I was in Colombia recently, and with the many refugees who have fled across the border and migrants into Colombia from Venezuela, it was so impressive and joyful to see how far we have come, because when we started our investments there a few years ago, when the Venezuela crisis broke out, there was very little in place for them. And first of all, the government of Colombia absorbed 500,000, 500,000 children from Venezuela into the public system. And then ECW, with our partners in country, UNICEF, Save the Children, Norwegian Refugee Council, World Vision, and many others, and local organizations have supported the government in absorbing them into the public system, and also supported non-formal learning through very well-established, I'd say, learning centers to prepare them for the public system. And I met so many young Venezuelans and also marginalized Colombians from the host community who were able to enjoy a quality education thanks to our investments. And you sit down and you ask them, and they say, I ask them, what is your dream? And they say, I want to be a lawyer. And I ask, why do you want to be a lawyer? I want to stand up for justice. I've seen so much injustice and and this comes from young girls, young boys, or I want to be a teacher. I want to give every child in Venezuela and Colombia a chance to learn the way we are learning now. And when you see so many of them sitting in colorful classrooms, the teachers are highly qualified, they have the learning material, they have gone through mental health services, and you see them happy, you see them smiling, you see them yearning to be in school and enjoying it. Then you see the rewards of all that work. And I've seen the same scenes when we go and see the refugees from South Sudan in Uganda, where we worked very closely with the Ministry of Education. And when they arrived from South Sudan, there were 1.2 million refugees who came, and half of them were children in school age, and they had nothing. And now they go to school, they have classrooms, they have trained teachers, they're protected. You ask them, what do you want? What is your dream? I want to be an engineer. I want to be an actress. I want to be an artist. Just to see that joy and happiness and see them learning with all that passion and commitment and knowing it is possible thanks to the contributions from our strategic donor partners, foundations, private sector, the cooperation with the government, and the UN and NGOs. And we see it all over. As I said, over 7 million children and adolescents sit with those dreams and are making those dreams come true right now. I think that's a beautiful experience. Another one is a girl in the Eastern DRC. There are 200,000 girls that have been raped brutally. And it's so devastating to see. And I met this girl who she was raped twice. And she now was able to attend school and learning. And they were also, she had gone through and had a psychologist that was with her as part of our program investment. And she could now learn and go to school, and they were babysitting facilities so that her children were looked after. And she was just one of many of those girls while she went to school. You feel you're making a difference. There's a difference, and you're bringing hope. And they are very resilient. They've gone through so much, and it takes so little for them to draw on that resilience and go for their dreams. So it's worth every penny invested. We just need more, though. Our goal has been 1.5 billion to reach 20 million children in our new strategic plan. And we have reached about 60% in that financial resource mobilization in our high-level financing conference, which is a great start. 2 months into our strategic plan, we have over 60% of the resources secured. But I would appeal to more strategic donor partners, governments, private sector, and foundations. Please help us close the funding gap and be part of reaching 20 million children and youth in the hardest spots of crisis, climate disasters, and forced displacement around the globe.
Yasmine, the story you've shared is truly, truly inspiring. It shows how, in the darkest circumstances, with collective effort of multiple agencies, ministries, and civil societies, hope can be restored. You're enabling people to see beyond their current situation, to dream, to envision a future where, in these contexts, it's really difficult to see yourself in the future. For our listeners who've been moved by your narratives and want to contribute, is there a way they can support the financing of education, especially in humanitarian contexts and protracted crisis? Or perhaps are there other ways they could aid in supporting the efforts of Education Cannot Wait in these challenging circumstances?
Thank you very much, Pauline, and thank you for posing that question, because it is an opportunity to reach all your listeners. And thank you to all of you for listening to this. Yes, you can by, first of all, advocate for education in emergencies and protracted crisis, education for children in conflicts, armed conflicts, climate disasters. Advocate because they are the ones who are left furthest behind. We can advocate for education resources in general for all children and adolescents around the globe, and we should, because there are children all over the globe that don't have an opportunity to go to school and learn and become. But we mustn't do it at the cost of those who are left absolutely furthest behind, who have no opportunity, who are living under the rockets of warfare or massive destruction from climate disasters, or as refugees in neighboring countries or elsewhere. Let's put those left furthest behind up front. Let's advocate for them, and let's advocate for education as the very foundation for sustainable development and all sustainable development goals. And it's really the key that will turn around access and enjoyment of all sustainable development goals, and the key that will unlock all human rights. So let's streamline and zoom in on the real tipping point that education provides. Advocate, and please go out and mobilize support and resources. Feel free, be boundless, take action, and we appreciate anything you can do to bring this to the conscious of the whole world and those who can make a difference.
Yasmine, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your story.
Thank you, Pauline. It's been an absolute pleasure and privilege to be with you. Thank you so very much. Bye.
And that was Yasmine Sherif from Education Cannot Wait, or ACW. In this episode, we discussed the challenges and needs in providing education in crisis hit areas. she emphasized that humanitarian aid is not enough on its own. We also need to bring development into these situations to truly empower people. With around 222 million children and youth lacking quality education, Education Cannot Wait provides immediate, crisis-sensitive aid and develops multi-year programs. Yasmine shared also moving examples and their successes in helping children get access to quality education and basic needs. However, she also cautioned us that technology is not a cure-all solution, given the lack of infrastructure in many crisis areas. Yasmine ended with a call to action to all of us, encouraging listeners to advocate for education in these humanitarian contexts and protracted crisis, emphasizing that education is the foundation for sustainable development. You can find more of the SDG Learncast on the UN SDG Learn website. For now, I'm Pauline Duman. Thanks for listening.